The breeze startled me as I stood barefoot on the porch, the coffee in my hand growing cold while the Carolina air carried that uncertain chill between night and day. Morning, not yet warm, and darkness, not fully gone. A sudden gust tugged at my sundress, catching the hem and lifting it higher than I would ever allow had I been prepared. And that's when I noticed him, Mark, my colleague, my daughter's acquaintance through me, and he paused at the top of the steps, eyes locked on mine, the faint beat of his pulse visible at his throat. 1 second was all it took for the moment to shift. He said nothing, and I stayed silent too, the quiet stretching between us until it felt like its own language. What crossed his face wasn't shock but something deeper, something unsettling. The moment hovered there, delicate yet heavy, as if the world itself hesitated, waiting for us to define what had happened. I didn't realize then that it would mark the start of something I would both long for and regret. My name is Lorraine, I'm 60 years old, and my life has grown still too still. I live just outside Savannah in a white house that still faintly holds the scent of the man who left it behind. My husband of 34 years walked out 2 summers ago, taking little more than his clothes, his cologne, and the pieces of me that used to feel awake. He left for someone younger, someone who still laughed without effort. I didn't shed tears the day he left. I had cried enough while he was still here. Mark is 35, a colleague who once met my daughter Julia back when love still seemed wide and uncomplicated. She once said he made her feel understood, but lately she says the opposite, that he feels far away, unreachable, even when sitting right beside her. I didn't know how far he had drifted until that morning on the porch, when he tried to steady his voice as he finally spoke. "Morning, Lorraine," his tone cracking like aging paint, and I pulled my sweater tighter, pretending I was in "You're early," I murmured, though I hadn't expected him at all, and he gave a small, uneasy smile before saying Julia mentioned I needed someone to look at the gutters, which I knew was untrue since I hadn't spoken to her about anything. Yet instead of questioning it, I moved aside and told him to come in as he walked past close enough for something in the air to shift, a pull I tried to convince myself I was imagining. Even after he left, the feeling of where he'd stood lingered, and later that night, staring into the mirror, I didn't examine the marks of age but my own eyes, trying to understand what he might have noticed in them, and worse, why I wanted him to. He returned the next day without warning, his truck settling into my driveway like it belonged there. And this time I was ready, dressed modest, shoes on, calm, carefully arranged. So when I asked if he was still worried about the gutters, he rubbed the back of his neck and said Julia mentioned my kitchen faucet was leaking. Another untruth, another opening. And again, I let him inside. We sat at the kitchen table while the clock ticked too loudly, and I kept rearranging dishes that didn't need attention just to avoid looking at him until he finally asked if I was doing all right, the question landing with more weight than expected. And I answered that I was fine before asking why, prompting him to lower his gaze and trace the rim of his cup as he admitted I seemed quieter lately. And I told him softly that was simply true. He nodded slowly and confessed that sometimes he walks around his home with Julia and feels like a guest there, like they're both pretending to remember how to love each other. And I leaned forward to and replied that marriage isn't always a home, that sometimes it feels like a hallway lined with locked doors. And that single sentence opened one between us as we ended up talking for 2 hours. We didn't end up talking about faucets or gutters at all, but about the hollow spaces life leaves behind, the loneliness we try to hide, and the versions of ourselves we lost along the way. He admitted he missed feeling noticed, and I found myself confessing that I missed the woman I used to be, when being loved felt real. When he reached for the sugar bowl, his fingers brushed mine, and we both stilled. I could have pulled away, but I didn't. After my husband walked out, I learned that what I longed for most wasn't him, it was the feeling of being truly seen. And Mark, in that quiet, conflicted way of his, saw me, not the 60-year-old, not someone defined by age, just me. He started stopping by more often, each visit slipping into place easier than the last, the excuses thinning out, the silences deepening. One evening, standing in the doorway, he murmured, "I tell you things I don't even tell my partner. Is that wrong?" I asked softly. "Maybe," I said, when he hesitated, "but it feels true." He gave a small nod, like he'd been waiting for someone to allow him to breathe. By the third time, the pretense was gone. No talk of repairs or chores. His girlfriend was out of town, and when his truck appeared again, he didn't bother knocking. He simply stood there, waiting, and I opened the door and let him in, watching him step inside like someone crossing into a place they knew they shouldn't want. We sat in the living room with sunlight pooling across the floor, dust drifting like whispered confessions between us. No words, no movement. Only a tension so thick it felt like a heartbeat. At last, he said, "I think about you more than I should," his voice unsteady though his eyes held firm. My breath caught. "Do you think about her when you're here?" I asked, and his jaw tightened as he answered, "I try to." We sat close, the charged space between us alive, his warmth brushing the edge of my restraint, the choice hanging there like a held breath. He lifted his hand slowly, hovering in the gap between us, waiting for me to take it. I didn't, though every part of me wanted to.